Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, automate tasks, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Larendee Roos, the founder of Roos Advisors. Larendee's career is a remarkable journey of strategic adaptation and human-centered leadership, spending 18 years in corporate life before she pivoted to entrepreneurship. After realizing her value as a facilitator of growth, Larendee built Roos Advisors into a thriving consultancy that helps organizations achieve greater profitability through alignment. Her insights into building systems, fostering communication, and the critical importance of human judgment in an AI-driven world offer a powerful blueprint for leaders seeking sustainable growth. Larendee, welcome to The Growth Shift.
David, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with you this morning.
I'm honored to have you on the show this morning. Larendee, your journey began with 18 years in corporate life, right? And then pivoting to entrepreneurship from there. Now, tell us a little bit more about your journey going through corporate, some of the highlights and some of the greatest lessons that you took into entrepreneurship.
So I studied psychology. And after leaving school, I worked in the restaurant business for a regional family chain of restaurants in their training environment. And it was really such a great opportunity for me to look at the power of people coupled with systems and what a difference that makes in the ability to offer incredible customer service. So I moved and meant I had to find a new career path. And I answered an ad in a newspaper. That doesn't happen anymore. And went to work for an incredible human being named Ken. And he really was such a great mentor and taught me literally everything I needed to know about running a successful business. He was foundational, and I still carry so many of the principles that he taught me forward to the clients that we work with now. So I started out as an executive assistant to 3 very busy executives. And every time they would give me an opportunity, I just kept saying yes, and we'll figure it out. Which meant, because I didn't have an MBA and I didn't study business, that I had to do a lot of learning and reading and learning acquisition on my own, which I'm an avid learner. So that wasn't difficult for me. People always ask me, how do you have time to get all the certifications, continue education? And I just kind of jokingly tell them I don't play tennis. So I kind of use my muscles elsewhere. So I spent 18 years, kind of the short end of the story is during that time, I worked in every department within the organization. And when I first joined Extra Space Storage, which was the company that I went to work for, we owned 3 properties. We had an asset value of probably about $10 million. And over the course of the next 16 years, I was with them for a total of 17 and a half. Over that next 16 years, I was able to help create the structure for operations and systems. Over the next 16 years, I was able to lay the foundations for how we operated our organization, how we built a cultural alignment within that organization, because the goal was that the culture and how we did things would survive Ken and Larendee. That was really the goal, the ultimate goal. And then over time, I also took on the responsibilities of acquisitions and managing the department that was responsible for acquisitions, and then sat on the executive approval committee for development. So it was really a rich experience, and feel so grateful that I was willing to continue to learn and grow, but equally grateful that Ken was willing to give me the opportunity, so that by the time I retired in 2003, we had an asset value of close to $1 billion, and we were operating 189 facilities nationwide. So how did we do that? Cultural alignment, strong systems, strong people, and really leaning into those people. That's how we did that.
Larendee, that's an incredible story. I mean, your own personal hands-on MBA in business, if you want to look at it like that, right? Going from approximately a $10 million valuation to nearly $1 billion. Seeing what that growth meant, what it required, and what had to happen to get there. A lot of people don't have the opportunity, the privilege to not just experience that, but also to be taken under the wing of one of the business owners and be shown the path forwards. What do you think were some of the most important or memorable lessons that you learned from Ken? You mentioned there were certain principles and, of course, other lessons that you might have acquired, but what do you think was the most important that you identified, aside from the cultural alignment, like you mentioned, of course, being the most pivotal?
Sure. Really, just for simplicity, I'll kind of put it into 3 buckets. Number 1 being the honoring humanity. And Ken was always, and still to this day, is very much about we need to care for people. If we care for people and we take care of people, then they'll take care of us. And it wasn't a tit for tat. It was always, we're going to care for people no matter what. And even if we end up having to part ways, they always need to leave our relationship with dignity and respect. Fundamental, foundational, and that was just the way we operated. So that human kindness really was very important. Then from a business perspective, there's so much. I learned so much about the psychology of pricing, market tension, niching down in a market, understanding the market. From a real estate perspective, he taught me 2 things. Number 1, you make money in real estate when you buy. So take your time. Know what the opportunity is and get your best deal, make your best deal. Again, honoring humanity, that we can both win. The seller can win, the buyer can win, but it needs to be a good deal, because then what we do after the fact will only enhance. So that was really important. And then he also taught me, and this was kind of interesting, the principle was that money doesn't solve everything, but it does solve a lot. So you may as well do your best to get as much as you can, again, in a kind way, in a human way, where everyone wins, because it will just expand your ability to be able to make a difference in the life of yourself, your family, and your community. So those would be, from a business perspective, a couple of the things. And then just from a human growth perspective, Ken was an avid learner, an avid traveler, still remains so to this day. So even though I love learning implicitly and innately, he really encouraged me and honored. He never told me, okay, you need to read this book or take this class, but he really noticed and honored when I was doing that, and then allowed me to take those skills of what I was learning and then apply them in the workplace. So really grateful for that.
Yeah, that's incredibly fantastic. Some truly profound and impactful lessons for anyone to have the privilege of learning and earning as well.
Learning and earning, right?
But there are some really impactful lessons here that you shared. And of course, just witnessing a company go from 10 million to nearly $1 billion, there must be a whole lot more there as well. But whether in your own personal life or through this journey of in the corporate world and seeing this play out, what do you think has been the most impactful growth shift moment that you've experienced that's allowed you to shape what it is you're doing today with Roos Advisors?
I retired from Extra Space Storage in 2003 because my children were getting older. I was raising 7 children at the time, and I felt like my nanny was raising my children because I was traveling 3 out of 4 weeks a month. And I had tried, Ken was really great at trying to find ways for me to stay within the organization and flex, but it really came down to the point that I realized there will always be some things that only Ken or Larendee could do. And so sometimes the way to pivot and change is to get off the train. So it was a very painful decision for me, but I retired in 2003, and I thought I was just going to finish raising my children. I always say God had a different plan, because people started calling me after they found out I had retired saying, I want to start a business, I need to navigate a merger, I have an employee issue, can you help? So David, I would show up with a yellow notepad and roll up our sleeves. What are we dealing with? And then create a plan and a strategy to work through that problem and come to a solution. And then that just kept repeating. People kept referring me. And so for 6 years, I didn't have a business card. I didn't have a website. I was just showing up wherever I was needed. And I really had a moment, though, where I felt like I needed to live in more integrity, that these things that I was helping my clients put in place, I should also have for myself, because I needed to go through and really understand what it was like to live that lived experience that my clients were living. So over the weekend, I created a website, created my business cards, created my logo, and 5 iterations of that later, we now have Roos Advisors. So that was one thing. And then the second thing was that so I opened Roos Advisors in 2003, and in 2008, everything changed. I experienced a profound personal family tragedy, and that impacted my life, my family life, and my business. And everything I thought I was building on this new journey began to crumble, and the assumptions I had thought about stability, direction, capacity were being challenged. And so it was at that moment that I learned that sometimes resilience doesn't mean holding on, it means letting go. And so I made a dramatic move from Utah to New York City. I had one client, no network, no safety net, and everything had to change. My environment, my approach, my path forward for my life and for my business. But what didn't change, David, and has never changed, is my determination. My belief that the most incredible thing I'll have to take with me, even when I'm no longer on this planet, is what I have learned through my relationships with people and learning from those who've paved the way before me. So I went back to school in a very real sense. I continued my education in psychology. I earned additional certifications, developed new skills, and learned how to intentionally build a network from scratch. There's no place better to do that than in New York City. And that adage, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, is because on the one hand, it's very difficult, but on the other hand, your grit and your abilities are put to the fire really quickly because everything moves really quickly there in a New York minute, they say. So I leaned into that network, and from 2009 until 2017, the other thing I learned how to do was ask for help. So I grew up in a very kind of blue-collar family where there was nothing a lot of good hard work couldn't solve. But sometimes that meant that I didn't know how to ask for help. So I asked for help from that network that I built, and I really rebuilt my consulting firm. And that season fundamentally helped shape how I walk with clients today and facilitate their growth. So the reinvention wasn't a detour. It actually became the work, my life work, and the work that we do with our clients.
Wow. So after leaving the corporate world, retiring for sake of wanting to raise your children and not have them be raised by their nanny, ultimately, there was that breakup period for you. It felt devastating. It felt like a loss, but very quickly through the relationships that you built, the impact that you had, the value you provided, people were knocking on your door. Mm-hmm. It was definitely unexpected, but it led to a new path, right? And of course, you mentioned the family tragedy you experienced in 2008, moved to New York City. And at that time, many people in that position, after having perhaps lost something that was as well built with not ease necessarily, but it came to you. Opportunity was knocking on your door. I think a lot of people would have seen themselves as starting again from zero, right? But you were starting from experience. You recognized what it is that you already had, and you didn't feel like you were behind necessarily, but you were in a position of power and control, and you decided to take action on what it is you could control rather than perhaps almost put yourself in a victim mindset of, oh, well, I have to do this again. It's going to be so hard. And look at where you've come today. That's fantastic.
Thank you, David. Yeah, it's really thinking clearly that none of us, even though it can feel that way, are ever starting from ground zero. That sometimes we're afraid to look at that foundation of mess, sometimes because humanity's messy. That's just the truth. I don't believe in broken people. I just believe that humanity's messy because I believe at our core we're strong, we're divine, we're resilient, but sometimes and often we forget. So that messiness, that crumbling is also foundation. And then we can pivot, up from there, kind of also the phoenix rising from the ashes type thing.
Today at Roos Advisors, you specialize in helping companies and organizations achieve greater profitability through alignment and team development. Can you tell us what that looks like in practice and how you're actually working with your clients today?
Sure. So in a sentence, we help with organizational design and team development. So the organizational design is, what industry are you in? Who are you trying to serve? And there are metrics and methods. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, that are tried and proven, that we can build off of, rather than, starting from a blank sheet of paper. So we're able to, through our years of experience in multiple industries, so we primarily focus in the construction and real estate industry because that's the industry I grew up in. I understand the day in the life of any C-suite executive because I lived that. But we certainly have helped people across many different sectors, from education to medical to professional services of a variety, right? So logistics. But ultimately, there is a framework that can be you can really flex within. But it's kind of like having, when you're a child and you're learning how to bowl, how they put the bumpers up for you. So the organizational design that we bring is a framework that gives you a lot of flexibility to weave and move within, and also allows your team. And then what we also say, don't forget the team is the one who's flexing and moving, even in an AI society that we're in right now, which I know we're going to get to a little bit later. So helping those get alignment as to who we are, what we stand for, and then from the time we place an ad for recruiting all the way through that employee's life cycle with us, that team member's life cycle with us, we're constantly sewing into who they are, what they want to contribute to the company and to the world, and then we get alignment. So it should reduce a lot of friction because, again, life's messy. So let's reduce as much friction as we can so we can really powerfully show up for one another to do the work that we're all called to do.
Amazing. And I mean, just with the type of work you do, it sounds like, with the experience and the knowledge you have, you could be working with enterprise corporations because they need that. But it seems like, I would suppose you're working in the SMB space because of the type of impact that you can have there, right? In larger corporations, sure, you can help a lot and you can earn a lot, but the impact is typically a lot less, right? While as working with smaller and mid-sized businesses, they need these systems, right? They need that help in that direction to be able to have the impact that they want to make essentially as well, right?
That's true. And 80% of our clients are SMB, although we do serve large enterprise clients as well, that we may be called in for a special project or a special workshop. We still apply the same principles, but you're right, David, 80% of what we do is in the SMB space. And we're really, really grateful to live in that ecosystem, because that's where we're able to see really market results. So clients who work with us experience usually 35% increase in revenues, within the first year. And for another couple of years, and then percentage may go down, but the revenues continue to increase because we were able to, walking with those C-suite executives, we're able to make an impact and facilitate that growth, which is really exciting for us.
Can you share a story of us with that impact, how it played out, how you came in and implemented some of these systems and really the impact that followed?
Sure. So one example is we were working with an established electrical company in New York City. So the founder has a great story in that he was not US born, but he came here in his early 20s, and he took a skill that he had and built a company from it. And he's one of the smartest people that I know. I've often told him he reminds me a lot of Ken, even though they've never met. And so one of the things, though, is that as he had built this company, he had a solid reputation, so that was an issue. But the challenge was that he was lacking a clear, unified vision across his team, and it was an international team. So you have those cross-cultural, situations to deal with as well. So he needed stronger cross-departmental cohesion in an international environment. He needed a more modernized way to look at financial and operating systems evaluation and implementation. And then he needed a repeatable strategy for profitable and sustainable growth. So what we were able to do is work on the vision and alignment of the founder, the CEO, and ensure that all of his leadership was aligned in the same way. And that was a little messy, quite honestly. And imagine a company that's been in business for 20, 30 years, and this has never been really evaluated. People can quickly get in their own lane, so to speak. So we brought vision and alignment. Then we looked at the organizational structure and accountability. When I say accountability, what we say is we allow people to account for their ability. So I'm not holding David accountable. I'm having conversations with David where David says, here's how I'm accountable and here's how I'm going to account for my ability. And then we looked at different financial discipline and systems and made sure everyone understood the importance of everyone playing from the same playbook. Really important. And then the results after 1 year is that they were able to 2 times their revenue growth, 5% increase in gross profit, and then 10% increase in net profit. And, we're still working. So we helped them evolve from running a successful company, which was obviously very successful, to leading a scalable one that at some point the owner will be able to have some pretty good ability to make decisions about what will be in his best interest as he continues on with his life.
That is incredible. I mean, from a company in a state of, it sounds like, some internal misalignment,
Right.
An international cross-cultural company without a clear, cohesive story that all of the leadership team sees and understands, and all of the organization feels in unison with, and being able to bring them together in such a way, especially for the employees, being able to pull the best out of them and have them pull the best out of themselves through that accountability, right? And just having everybody playing from the same playbook, moving in the same direction. I think it becomes very clear very easily for the audience as to how powerful this can be, and how in 1 year it led to doubling their revenue. That is absolutely fantastic, Larendee.
Yeah, it was a very exciting, and we continue to observe the power of what they're able to accomplish, opening new markets, hiring new personnel, bringing in that cohesion. Really powerful.
Yeah. And Larendee, in your own business experience, of course, not in the corporate world, but in your own business, you've seen 2 sides of the equation when it comes to growth and client acquisition, right? In one situation, people knocking on your door, seeking you out, and in another, in a completely unknown environment, having to build your own network, go out there and find clients for yourself. A lot of coaches today and consultants are either in one or the other situation, and they're struggling, right, to add in that second avenue. Either they're built off of referrals because of the impact that they've been able to have, or they're starting up new and they're having to break out into a cold network, build relationships, and pursue growth from there. With where you're at in business today, the impact that you have with your clients, and the experience you've seen on both sides of the equation, where are you finding and pursuing the best growth in today's market when it comes to client acquisition, with everything considered?
It's still both, David. We still receive a fair amount of referrals from clients, but I would say 75% of what we have is through still building those networks. So we do that for 2 reasons. Number one, we need to be growing, because if you're not growing, you're dying. And so we need to be out there, because otherwise we're the best kept secret. We need to be in those rooms, speaking with others, letting them know that we're available for when the time is right for them. But we also need to do that because if we're going to be teaching other business owners how to do it, we need to know that we have walked the walk. We know what it's like, and we know the formulas, and we know the numbers. So of what it takes to feed the top of that funnel so that we can have the different levels of conversations that then convert into us working with the people we're meant to work with. So just that whole process, that whole funnel, that whole filtration system. So twofold, we have to do it because we need to do it, and we have to do it because we need to stay fresh on what's going on out in the marketplace and how we can then advise our clients to also do the same thing when it comes to client acquisition.
Now, you've been a consultant for over 2 decades now. Had a consulting company and been a solo consultant. And again, you've seen both sides of that equation, but the landscape has changed so much, right? Today, it's an increasingly digital world. People are looking online for client acquisition or for seeking out potential consultants to work with. On one side of the equation, a lot of people are moving online, but people and humans are the core element of business at the end of the day. So really, you still need to get in front of people and have meaningful conversations and show value. When we're looking at the dynamics in today's market, right? The need for interaction and in-person communication and value, and also the requirement of also being online in some way as well. What do you think are the biggest challenges that yourselves, as well as most consultants, are facing when it comes to effectively breaking through the noise and establishing predictable client acquisition?
For sure, technology is a great force multiplier. So different than 30 years ago when we were needing to do client acquisition and we would pull out the yellow pages and we would just start, dialing for dollars. Technology has helped us to be able to do more study demographically, socioeconomically, understanding who our potential true clients are. So I would just say technology has actually helped us a lot. So it's cut through a lot of the noise, and then it truly adds value because we can reduce some of the front or top of the funnel work that we had to do. So we can focus more on that customer communication, right? So we can focus more on, once I do have that prospect on the line with me, I really have spent time curating who I am, my message, showing up authentically, so that then I can move that person from prospect to potentially close. Technology also helps us that way too, because we know that statistically, whether you're selling cars, toothpaste, short-term rentals, whatever you're selling, there's a formula that's universal. That if I put 100 people in the top of the funnel, people I don't know, I likely will close somewhere between 2 and 4 of those prospects. So how can I do that in an efficient way so that I can be of maximum service? So that's, I believe, where technology has helped us. So to your point, once we have that prospect in our ecosystem, that we know how we can authentically show up for that person to determine whether we're going to do our best work with them or not, knowing they have options, a lot of options. And one of the things that I learned from Michael Port and Matthew Kimberly, Michael Port was the author of Book Yourself Solid, How to Land in a City Where You Know No One, and within 6 months be booked solid, was that everyone deserves to be helped, but there's no way I can help everyone. So it's a matter of finding those individuals that I'll do my best work with, because they'll be able to show up in their best way possible as well.
That's fantastic. Larendee, you shared a couple of things here that I think are really important to highlight for the audience. Right, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned one of the biggest lessons you learned is niching down and knowing exactly who it is you're going to help and how you help them. Right, and today for client acquisition, you need to know who you're going after and who you're trying to connect with. So using technology to build lists of people, validate email addresses, and just clarify exactly who it is you're going to spend your time with is that first step. Taking it from there, you mentioned, having a pipeline and, if it's 100 people you're putting in, knowing what sort of system you're using, so what sort of expectation or result that will come from it. Could you perhaps share, if it's not any secret sauce, share a little bit about your pipeline and what that looks like, how it is you're actually bringing people in after you've identified who it is you will actually be able to serve and help?
Right. So we've developed for ourselves and for our systems, probably develop's probably not the right word. We've adopted is probably a better way to say it. That again, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Weren't starting from a clean sheet of paper. But what we know, and the reason that tracking the numbers is so important is because as human beings, we're always looking for self-satisfaction and others' approval. Always. It's in our DNA. So I always encourage leaders of salespeople to set strong metrics that their salespeople will attach to, because at the end of the day, come Friday night, when you want to go have, pizza with your family, you want to close your desk saying, I did what I had control over today. I put them in the top of the funnel, or I let my AI put them in the top of the funnel, and then I followed through with my sequence of 5 to 7 steps. Of that, the first 3 got me to a conversation, and then the last 2 were follow-up that closed the deal. That's what I have control over. I don't have control over the final signing on the dotted line, because people will make lots of decisions for a variety of reasons. But on Friday night, I can close my desk knowing that I did steps 1 through 6, and then step 7, who knows? It'll happen or it won't happen, right? And also how we handle that sequencing. And it's going to be slightly different for every salesperson, but we do know that it probably is somewhere between a 7 to 10 touch system that will result in the closure of a sale. Now, if it's a referral, we can probably get it down to about 3 or 4 steps, but that cold lead, that person I've never met, it's just going to take more frequency and consistency, pure and simple.
Everyone's heard it, but it's even more powerful coming from such an expert consultant as yourself. The money is in the follow-up. You need to be following up. You need to be consistent, especially in sales, but across all business. At the end of the day, there's only 2 things you can control: your action and your attitudes. You have to put in the actions. You can't expect the outcomes, but as long as you're consistent with the actions and you're maintaining the right attitude, things will come together as long as you're still growing and you're not dying as a result of stopping your learning, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And how fortunate are we, David, that part of that customer acquisition process is school. It's part of Earth School. How
Mm.
fortunate are we that we get to show up every day and learn more about humanity through having those conversations? It's brilliant.
You're mentioning systems, you're mentioning technology. AI came up a couple of minutes ago
Mhm.
about using it in your pipeline. Tell us a little bit more about where it is AI is starting to come into play for you and how you're growing and shifting with it again.
Sure. So fundamentally, our approach is very intentional, and we use AI to support 30 years plus of experience. So we don't start with a clean sheet of paper. There's this idea, well, you have to know the right prompts. Well, the right prompts comes out of experience. So whether I'm using AI for sales, for operations, for financial stability, for human resources, so we use AI to support the strong systems that we've already built. And I really firmly believe that AI supports strong systems that can't compensate for broken ones. So technology should make good leadership easier. It won't replace it, but it should make it easier and more efficient. So I can take, if a client comes with a question, I can take 30 years of documentation, research, review that's empirical and subjective, and I can put it into AI and say, here's the presenting problem based on 30 years of empirical data and subjective data. What are some suggestions? And it will give me suggestions. And then we're not done, because now I have to bring again my judgment back to the table and back to the situation. So sometimes AI and I will fight a bit. It's really powerful. I learned how to do that pretty well in the boardroom when I was at Extra Space. That friction, that coming together, and that reasoning is really
Yeah.
helpful. So, we do the same thing with AI. We don't just accept whatever it says. We challenge it because we have the experience and the systems, to support and make that possible for us. So that's how we
Yeah.
use it.
No, and that's wonderful, right? And something you said there that's so important is that, at the end of the day, AI cannot replace human judgment and human reasoning, right? I hope we never get there. I don't think we ever will. It'd be hard to envision that. A lot of people say yes, a lot of people say no.
Mhm.
Randy, from your perspective, as a consultant with a psychology degree and 40 years of experience, how do you advise leaders then to leverage AI to empower their teams without replacing the critical human judgment and experience needed for complex problem solving?
So, in my estimation, if you're trying to replace humanity, that's a zero sum game. From a psychological perspective, from a humanity perspective, just from 40 plus years lived experience now, that the only reason AI exists is because humanity put data in. And it's not that old. Don't forget that all of us only had access to personal computers in the World Wide Web since the early, 90s in the way that we do today. And it's certainly grown since then. So it's not that we are that enriched in this experience. Even the Industrial Revolution didn't happen that long ago. So we need humanity. AI is going to need humanity to continue playing in the box in order for it to even do its job. That's why there's some belief out there that we're going to hit the ceiling pretty quickly because we don't have enough data. Who knows if that's true or not, but one thing's for sure. I would just say, if you're feeling stuck in your business, stuck with people, I don't know what to do with AI, rather than saying, how do we get there faster? How do we grow faster? Let's maybe ask a different question. What is the current drain? What's silently draining us right now that's causing our people not to be able to show up in the best way possible? And there's not a one size fits all answer for that either. But if we can fix that, then the growth will follow. If we can fix that, then we'll have easier adoption of these different technologies and AI tools as well. So technology won't fix bad leadership, ever.
Randy, your story covers strategic adaptation, human-centered leadership, and the critical importance of alignment. For the founders, the coaches, and the growth-minded listeners who are navigating their own growth shift, what's the single most important piece of advice that you would leave them with about embracing change and building a truly aligned and profitable business?
I would say that know what's working and simplify the systems and the processes. So if it's working, how can we do it more simply? Because then it'll be easier for us to bring more people to the table. And I've seen this over and over again with the companies that we've worked with, that if we slow down, step back 5 paces and figure out how we can simplify what we're already doing, then we can bring more humanity to the table. Clearly defined roles. Here's who we are, what we stand for, where we're headed, and we repeat it over and over and over again because we forget. And as we're adding new people to the team, whether that's employees, vendors, clients, just that whole alignment of who we are and in this ecosystem, we're going to be living together in some type of ecosystem. Let's make sure that we're aligned as much as possible. And then strong standards of how we treat one another and how we are in relationship with one another, because at the end of the day, that's really where the rubber meets the road. Treat one another as though we're all in it to win it. Whether the human being is going to show up that way or not, I can still show up that way. And so then everyone on my team is valuable and has the ability to stand in their own authority, make an impact, and then the outcomes follow, whatever those outcomes are going to be.
Larendee, thank you so much for sharing your story as well as your lessons with the audience today. For anyone listening who might like to learn more about what you're doing, or perhaps might even like to continue the conversation, what would be the best way to find you?
They can contact us at info@roos, ROOS, advisors.com is probably the best way.
Thank you again for joining us on The Growth Shift today.
Thank you, David.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.